Good morning. Thank you for joining us. This is the information session on Ecology's development of agency request legislation regarding hazardous waste fees. My name is Kimberly Getz, and I coordinate legislative policy for the Department of Ecology's Hazardous Waste and Toxics Reduction Program. And I'm here today with Missy and Amber, who are helping us out behind the scenes. Thank you. So the purpose of today's discussion is to present our agency request legislation concepts, describe the process that we're going through, and answer your questions, as well as to provide a space for you to provide some initial feedback. As you can see, developing agency request legislation is a very lengthy process. Earlier this year, each of Ecology's environmental programs had an opportunity to develop ideas that they wanted to propose as agency request legislation. And those ideas were reviewed and narrowed down by our executive team here at the department. And right now, we're at the stage where we're collecting information from interested parties, which we will then use to refine those initial ideas. Eventually, we'll submit our final proposals to the governor's office and OFM for their review and hopefully their approval. And if we do get authorization to proceed, then we will then start the process to work to find sponsors and get ready for next year's session. So the wastes that we regulate in Washington include things like solvents and paints and pharmaceuticals and dry cleaning chemicals. And then we also regulate the businesses that generate these wastes here in Washington. Some of these wastes are regulated under federal law, and some are regulated only under state law. And I'm sure a few of you on the call today know that there is a difference between hazardous waste and dangerous waste. But for the purpose of today's discussion, we're going to treat those words as being interchangeable. Also, for the purpose of today's discussion, I'm going to generalize a bit when I talk about businesses. Yes, there are subtleties and nuances in the law that might make a generalization not true for a particular business here and there. But for the most part, the generalizations are good enough for the discussion that we're going to have today. And like, for example, on this particular slide, not all paints and stains and sealers are regulated. Not all pharmaceuticals are regulated wastes, but a lot of them are. And for purposes of today's discussion, that's how we're going to talk about wastes. I am not going to go into detail about our hazardous waste budget, but I did just want to provide a high-level overview of just to provide a frame of reference. So as you can see, 13% of our budget comes from a federal grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency that covers a chunk, not all, but a chunk of our compliance work, like inspections. 17% comes from fees in the Hazardous Waste Assistance Account. And basically, the rest of our budget comes from the Model Toxics Control Account from MOTCA, which is funded by the Hazardous Substance Tax. Like other state funds, there is a significant projected shortfall in MOTCA, and the future of our EPA RCRA grant is, I guess, murky is the best word to use right now. So this is the environment that frames our discussion today. So let's talk about the Hazardous Waste Assistance Account and where the money comes from. Currently, Ecology charges two fees that help support our work to regulate hazardous waste. And these fees were originally created in 1990 after the Matka Citizens Initiative passed. And that's I-97 if you're ever interested in looking that up. The first of these fees is the hazardous waste generator fee, which is assessed on all businesses that generate hazardous waste in Washington state if they make more than $12,000 a year. And that's somewhere around 31,000 businesses. Originally, that fee was $35, and the statute tells us to increase the fee for inflation each year, and it tells us how to calculate that. Ecology made those adjustments for a number of years. But starting after the dot-com bust and the beginning of the economic downturn in 2002, all the way through the end of the Great Recession in 2009, we did not inflate that fee like we were supposed to. The fee in 2002 was $46, and it remained at $46 through 2010. If we had not done that, the fee today would be $103 for 2026. This year's actual fee is $69. So you can see that giving businesses a break for those years has had a really significant long-term impact on Ecology's funding to the tune of about $721,000 a year, less than the legislature intended for us to have. The other fee that we charge is the pollution prevention planning fee, which is an adjustable fee that's paid by businesses that create large amounts of hazardous waste or store and release toxic chemicals. In contrast to the generator fee, we only have 400 to 500 businesses statewide that pay the planning fee. And the two fees are independent of each other. So, and planners almost always pay both. Planners fall into two buckets. First up is medium quantity generators, which is businesses that generate between 2,600 and 4,000 pounds of hazardous waste a year. They pay a flat fee. And for 2026, that fee is going to be $85. Large quantity generators, which is all the businesses that make more than 4,000 pounds of waste a year, they pay a fee based on how many pounds of waste they produce. But that fee has a cap, which is going to be just over $27,000 for 2026. It was, as you can see here, $26,865 last year. So here's what that looks like based on 2025 numbers. In 2025, we had 61 facilities that paid the flat fee, and the flat fee was $82 that year. And that averages out, for that level of facilities, they averaged 2.5-ish cents per pound of waste that they generated. The next chunk are the businesses that have larger amounts but are not capped out. That's the 377 middle facilities. They paid the calculated fee that year, which was just over 8.5 cents a pound. Their fees averaged out to be around $3,700 a year. But you can see there was a pretty big range of fees paid by facilities in this group. But the largest generators is where you see the effect of the statutory cap. As a category, these businesses paid an average of 1.5 cents a pound. Individually, those fees really range from 1/10 of a cent per pound up to 8.5 cents a pound. But they all paid that statutory cap of $26,000. So to put some perspective on these ranges, the pollution prevention universe of facilities, all of these facilities added together, were responsible for 93 million pounds of wastes and releases in 2025. 2 facilities were responsible for a little over a third of that amount. And the top 5 facilities were responsible for 54% of that total. So you can see waste generation is not equal across the state. So what do those fees pay for? Well, primarily, the purpose of these fees is to pay for toxics reduction assistance and technical assistance in training. The activities that the fee is supposed to pay for are actually laid out in statute. Revenue from both of these fees goes into the hazardous waste assistance account and pays for things like technical assistance to training and some of our safer alternatives work, like some of our work to address safer alternatives for 6-PPD. The photo here shows a spray paint efficiency training that we conduct to help businesses reduce their toxic air emissions, the amount of materials that they use, and the amount of dangerous waste that they create. It's important to note that the legislature has appropriated $11.6 million from this account to cover the variety of activities related to pollution reduction and technical assistance. But the fees only generate $8.3 million in revenue, which means we are not actually able to do everything that the legislature has told us to do from this fund. So, as you can see, that's sort of a problem. First, the program cap on total revenue from the P2 fee limits how much work we can do and how many services we can provide. And as I mentioned earlier, the legislature has directed a significant portion of our work to be paid for from this fund, but the current fee structure and cap don't generate enough to cover that work. Of a bigger concern, at least for me, it would be the inherent inequity to the fees that I just discussed, right? I can't speak for everybody at Ecology, but having one group of generators paying what is arguably a fee that is 1/8 of what their competitors pay feels very problematic to me from a good government perspective. And to me, it also doesn't give the biggest generators any incentive to change their behavior to create less waste, which was part of the original purpose of adopting the pollution prevention planning statute, and that's laid out in the intent section there. And finally, the way we have to calculate the fee is not transparent until the calculations are finished. To determine the fees, our staff, the pollution prevention planning fee, our staff has to do an iterative calculation, adjusting the possible fee per pound until they get an equation that balances. Every time you change the possible fee, even if it's 3 or 4 decimal places out, you potentially change the number of businesses that get capped out, which means the difference has to get made up by the businesses that aren't capped out, that 377 businesses this last year. And that means there is no way for a business to accurately predict their fee from one year to the next unless they know they are absolutely capped out or they are never going to be capped out if they're in that flat fee category. So we are considering how we can address the system inequities, whether a cap on fees is really the best option, and whether it's time to completely revamp our system, right? 1990 was a long time ago, and the world is not the same, and waste streams are not the same as they were when this fee structure was put into place. We also think it's important to start talking about connecting fees with the services that they help fund and asking businesses that create work for ecology to start contributing to the funding of that work. And as an example, there are no specific fees on permitted businesses that pose the biggest environmental risk. For example, hazardous waste treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. Sites like the one you see here undergoing an inspection might not pay any fees to help offset Ecology's compliance work related to their permit. They don't pay the planner fee, and if they don't independently generate their own waste, they don't pay the generator fee either. In other states, those facilities can pay permitting fees of $100,000 or more to cover staff expenses. Businesses storing large amounts of waste or with large chemical storage tanks also potentially don't pay any fees despite the potential risk to the environment associated with these activities. So Ecology is planning to propose a new fee system that would get adopted through rule instead of in statute. And that could include a number of elements. First off, we think we want to propose an update to the current fee system to bring it up to date with inflation. And that would cover us until a new system is adopted. And that would help alleviate some of the shortfall that's currently in the hazardous waste assistance account. To get to a new system, we envision hiring an independent consultant and creating a work group of interested parties and affected businesses, and would have them develop recommendations on what a new fee system should look like. And we want to make sure that we're coming up with a process that is defensible and supported. And this was an approach that worked well for our water quality system, water quality program in coming up with new water quality fees. And so we think that's a model that we want to look towards. If we do that, we would then use the work group recommendations as the basis for adopting a new fee system through rulemaking. And we think that this is the best way to come up with something that's fair for as many businesses as possible. All of this would also need to include changes to both the fees statute, which is 70A-218, as well as the pollution prevention statute, which is 214. And that's because the fees that are the funding source for the pollution prevention work and the two statutes work together to detail what work the fee revenue can be spent on. So we would also want to propose making some technical edits and bring the pollution prevention law up to date as well to make it current with current terminology and our technical assistance that we're providing under 214. And again, that's all to clarify what the fees in 218 can be spent on. So that is the idea in a nutshell. We would love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. It does not have to be today. You are more than welcome to take some time, think about it, and get back to us. But if you do have initial reactions, or if you have questions or comments, and you would like to share them at this time, we would love to hear them. Again, please remember, we are being recorded. So if you don't want to identify yourself on the recording, please submit your comment or question through the chat and ask Amber to not identify you. And so I think with that, we will open it up to questions and comments and suggestions and insights.
And we do have a couple of questions in the chat already.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this first one from Sean Egan, is the generator fee annual or one time?
Oh, great question. I should have mentioned both fees are annual fees. So the $69 fee is assessed on businesses each year.
Okay, and from Amber Carter, can Ecology walk through frequency and amounts of MOTCA fund shifts made by the legislature and any impact to the hazardous waste program?
Oh, Amber, is that a question? There have been a number of fund shifts over the years from MOTCA. Most of them, however, have not affected the hazardous waste program directly, except for overall availability of MOTCA funds, right? When, for example, when they shifted funds to cover Department of Transportation activities, it's not that it had a direct impact on Ecology, but there were fewer dollars available to be spent on hazardous waste related programs. And pollution prevention, hazardous waste permitting, those are all things that are in the MOTCA statute as being activities authorized to receive MOTCA funds. I think the biggest direct impact on us has been recently our limitations on MOTCA capital expenditures for a few of our pollution prevention reduction programs, such as our mercury switch swap out program, where we had a bounty program for auto scrap facilities to remove mercury switches out of hoods and trunks so that the mercury didn't get released into the environment when the cars get squished. And then this year, there's been some limitations on how many funds are going to be available for us for our program to collect and dispose of firefighting foam that contains PFAS and some of our other product swap out programs. I think if you want more detail than that, Amber, I think I'd have to go do some research to be able to answer anything more than that. So, yeah, let's say next. What was our next question?
Yeah, our next question here from Ramon. Can you briefly explain the Washington permit fee structure?
Oh, so yeah, there isn't one. We actually are somewhat unusual in that we don't charge any fees at all for hazardous waste permitting, for permit modifications, for post-closure oversight. The only fees that we charge is a cost recovery for facilities undergoing what we call corrective action cleanups. So facilities that have had a permit, a hazardous waste permit in the past, if they have had releases and I have a contaminated site and have to go through a court approved cleanup of that location, we do recover our costs for staff time. We call that cost recovery. That's the only thing we charge for when it comes to hazardous waste permitting. And like I said, that is different than other states. The majority of states charge fees for those activities. They range from a few $1,000s for a permit application or a permit modification, all the way up to, like I said in my presentation, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think the biggest fee is for a post-closure permit in Arizona, New Mexico, somewhere around there, and it maxes out at $400,000 for that permit. Oregon, for an Oregon hazardous waste permit, they charge an hourly rate with a maximum fee of, I think it was $150,000. And permits are renewed every 10 years. So other states charge smaller operation fees on an annual basis, but they sort of add up to that same 100,000, 200 and plus $1,000 over the life of a hazardous waste permit. So we are definitely in the minority of states in that we don't charge for that.
And they clarify,
Yeah.
since we were trying to mimic the water quality permit fee structure, could you explain how the water quality permit fee is structured?
Yeah. So what the water quality program, and they have their own WAC, and I should have looked it up and I didn't. Hey, Stacy, since I know you're on, could you look up the water quality fee and WAC and put it in the chat?
You got it. I'm on it.
Outstanding. That's I didn't credit Stacy in my opening remarks. Stacy Calloway is also joining us here from Ecology. She's our rules supervisor. So what they did with this work group was they went through and identified in great detail each one of their activities, the size of facility, whether that's, very specific to each one of those activities, and then developed a fee for each of those activities. So it's more than just, hey, an MPDES permit costs X number of dollars a year. The fee structure that they developed is very detailed. So, for example, and I'm just pulling it up here, it is WAC 173,224. And so, for example, I'm just going to scroll down and pick a fee. For industrial facilities, right? They have facilities that make aluminum alloys versus aluminum and magnesium production mills versus aluminum forming mills and aquaculture. Each one of these activities that are governed by some sort of water quality permit are very clearly laid out in the statute how much the fee is. Some of them are based on how many facilities you have. Some of them are based on how many tons are generated per year, how many gallons of wastewater or industrial waste are treated per year. And each one of those has its own fee that is adopted in rule. This particular rule appears to be set on a biennial basis. I think we probably wouldn't do it quite that often. I think adjusting for inflation works really well. It keeps the fee flat in relation to how much money is worth. Um, and so I think we would probably say we wouldn't do rulemaking every biennium. We'd probably do it no more than once every 5 or 10 years, would be my guess. That seems like a reasonable thing to put in a rule, but that would be something that we would love to have your input on, right? Do you think this fee structure is too detailed and happens too often? Or is it just the right level of detail, but doesn't need to happen as often as water quality does it? Those are all types of input that we would love to hear because, like I said, if we're inventing something from whole cloth, let's get it right the first time. But the advantage to doing things in rule is if you don't get it right, you can go back and change it, and you don't have to rely on the legislature to pass a bill to get it done. And it doesn't have to be a super high priority in order to get passed. All right. Let's see what's next.
Yeah, so we've got a question here from Ryan. Where can I get a copy of the slides?
We will be posting all of the slides, which is why we're limiting the presentation to just the slides, on YouTube. If you actually want a copy of them of your very own, send me a message and send me an email, and I will send it to you. Unless everybody wants a copy, and then we can try to send them out to all registrants. I think Zoom will let us do that, but I don't actually know because I am not a Zoom expert. But definitely, if you want a copy, send me an email, and we will get you a copy. And I can pop the slide forward, and there's my contact info, as well as our YouTube. All right. Great.
Okay.
And next.
Yeah, next question from Christopher Caprio. Does the policy shift proposed impact other rulemaking or other hazmat related programs?
Um, as currently envisioned, no, but that's also something that we should talk about, right? One of the other fees that other states charge for is related to what we call the toxics release inventory. And that's, you might know it as SARA Title III. That is for facilities that stored large amounts of hazardous chemicals and release toxic chemicals into the environment every year. They are currently covered, so those facilities are, many of them, covered by the pollution prevention planning fee. They are planners, some of them. It's unusual that you have somebody who only stores and doesn't generate waste as well, but it can happen. It may make sense to adopt one of those fees here in Washington as well, like other states do. If so, does it then make sense to direct those fees to things like emergency response? If it's being generated from a fee that's technically connected to emergency response and the Emergency Planning Act, maybe. So I think that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure we have a work group of affected parties, and Ecology isn't just making this up on our own, because there are other kind of tangentially related entities out there, and we want to make sure that we're taking into account everything that should be part of this. So that was a long roundabout way of saying maybe. And hey, maybe that's a great idea.
All right, so next question here. Is Ecology proposing to adjust the threshold a business must earn upward from $12,000 that triggers the requirement to pay the flat fee? If not, why not? Has the number of those paying the pollution prevention planning fee changed much since 1990 or been stable at 400 to 500? Do we anticipate a trend line of fewer businesses paying into this over time or a growing number of payers over time?
Oh, wow. Okay, let's go back. I'm going to have you break that down. So the first one, the threshold, I did not talk about it, but yes. And if we increase the fee to $103 where it would be today, the current statute does not make an adjustment for the threshold. I have put it on the list and set it at $35,000, which is the same inflation factor with a little bit of rounding. I rounded up. But I agree. I think that is a fabulous idea. And to keep things, again, everything kind of level in proportion to how money, the value of money changes over time. So, yes. Second question, if not, why not? Yes. What was the third question? Should have written it down.
Yeah. The third question, has the number of those paying the pollution
Ah,
prevention planning fee changed much since 1990 or been stable at 400 to 500?
and that I do not know. It didn't occur to me to look that up. Um, let me trying to think if there's any resource I have quick access to where I could look that up. And I don't, off the top of my head, know where I can find that information without asking somebody. So we are going to have to get back to you on that. And we will do so. We will figure out the answer to that. And as far as projected out, my guess would be for the foreseeable future that it would be fairly level set. I don't really anticipate the number of planners going down particularly. We might get a few dropping out at the very bottom. But when I look at the number of pounds of waste that are being generated each year, I don't see a whole lot of them of folks falling completely out of the universe. And if so, they are the smallest folks, so they aren't going to have a huge impact on the overall bottom line of fees that are being paid. Okay, next, what's up?
All right, we have a follow-up question from Amber Carter. What fee increase does Ecology expect, and how will the agency account for the fact that Washington businesses have already absorbed substantial tax and cost increases in recent years?
Excellent question. I think for the foreseeable future, until something new gets adopted, we're going to propose doing the reset to where the fee should be had we not done the hold off on the inflationary adjustments. So basically, resetting us to what $35 in 1990 would be today, and that's that $103, with a corresponding increase of the 30 to a threshold of $35,000. Beyond that, we don't know. It may be that the new system doesn't create any new revenue and that it just resets. It might be that the work group comes back and says, the current fee is what's best. You should leave it alone. That is absolutely a possibility. And we are open to that. So, and for the very reasons that you say, Amber. We recognize businesses have taken on a lot, especially small businesses. I think personally, and of course, this is not speaking for the agency and obviously not speaking for a work group that does not yet exist. I think treatment, storage, and disposal facilities are where my primary focus is, just because we are such an outlier with other states. And those facilities are such a significant portion of our work, and they are contributing nothing to the pot of money that we rely on to do that work. And those businesses are not suffering. Let's just put it that way. We are talking, they are multinational, multi-billion-dollar profit companies. So putting us on a level playing field with other states does not seem like a significant hardship for some of those businesses. I would personally be kind of hesitant to adopt fees that do put a bigger portion of the burden, especially on small businesses, for the exact reasons that you identify. But I think we're going to have to see what a work group would then recommend, and why it's so important that that work group include representatives from affected businesses. So, happy to engage further if you'd like. Did I answer everything that you asked? I think so.
And
yes.
Amber also asks if we can put a link to the legislative proposal in the chat.
As soon as there is one, absolutely. However, there isn't one yet. So, which is why we are here today, to get some initial feedback before we finalize a proposal. Once we do finalize a proposal, that will be, I believe, posted at this link here at the bottom on our legislative priorities page. I believe that there is nothing there yet. I mean, there's a little blurb about it now, but there's no proposals yet, because we're still working on developing them.
Thank you, Kimberly.
So if there is stuff that you want us to include, now's the time, making sure that we get that so that we can take a look at it and see if it's something that we can include. Great.
All right, and we have here from Ramon, related to what you just mentioned, how many TSDs are located in Washington State?
We have, you would ask me that.
I think we have 5, Kimberly.
Well, we have commercial, yes, I believe we have 5 commercial TSDs in Washington. We have more than that because we have a number of non-commercials.
Oh, good call.
And I have that in a document that, let's see here, is going to pop up on the recording. That's what I was afraid of. Hold on, let me grab this guy. Let me find out. I can tell you that answer. Talk amongst yourself. Oh, what other questions do we have here? And I will open this.
That's all we have in the chat so
all
far.
We have so far?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Anybody have anything they want to raise their hand and say something about? Let's see, we have. Okay, I don't see any. All right, so we have permitted treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. We have 10. We have an additional 5 facilities that are still technically in what we call interim status, which is long and difficult to explain, but basically they have a permit. We'll just call them that way. And then we have an additional 39 sites that are in corrective action and have what we call a permit light, which is a permit that is basically a court order, an agreed order, or a consent decree. And then we have an additional 14 permitted surface impoundments in the state, and 16 limited purpose landfills that are permitted in the state. Not all of those permits are administered by the Hazardous Waste and Toxics Reduction Program. We have a sister program in what we call the industrial section that covers a lot of the aluminum smelters, the refineries, chemical manufacturers, facilities that have multiple permits. So if your facility has a hazardous waste permit and a water quality permit and an air permit, you're probably assigned to our industrial section, which handles all of those permits in one-stop shop. But the hazardous waste permits, those first 10, those are HWTR permits. So we got a lot of sites, and not all of them are necessarily contributing to the work that Ecology does financially. All right. So do we have others? Any others that popped up?
No, nothing else in the
don't
chat.
see there.
Kimberly?
Yeah.
I do. So this is Missy. Our fees and reporting supervisor said the pollution prevention planning fee differs each year, but it typically ranges from 400 to 600 invoices that are sent out. So I guess the question was, has it been stable?
Yeah.
About.
Great.
Yes, asking if it's been stable at 400 to 500 for those paying the planning
for the life of it since the beginning.
Yeah.
My guess is there were probably a chunk more in the very beginning, because I know a number of facilities have graduated out of being planners and they used to be, and they are no longer because they generate a lot less waste than they used to. I don't know whether that's a huge number or whether it's a minority. But I want to say the number was bigger in the beginning, but has kind of fallen off and stayed stable, is my impression. But I could be wrong on that. Okay, well, we are slowly coming up to the end of our time, and I don't see any new questions in the chat. Amber or Missy, can we double check the Q&A and make sure nobody put questions there as well?
Yeah, nothing in the Q&A.
Brilliant. Love it. Okay, so we are, like I said, in response to Amber's question, we are still developing what this language would look like, what a Z draft would look like. For those of you maybe who aren't familiar with the legislative process, a Z draft is actual draft language of the bill, what the bill itself would say. And so that's still in process. We are still absolutely able to incorporate things if we think they're what the agency wants to propose. So I absolutely 100% want to hear from you if you have ideas. And even if you don't have ideas as to what we should put in the bill, maybe things we shouldn't put in the bill, or issues that you want to make absolutely sure we have taken into consideration, like, the impact on small businesses, for example. So please share those with me. Reach out. You can call me. You can email me. If you're on Teams and in the state system, send me a Teams message. I am absolutely happy to talk. with you one-on-one. You want to put together a meeting of, say, other folks that have similar kind of interests as you do, great. Some of you, I will say, many of you were invited to this webinar because you are a lobbyist who represents one of those companies that pays the $26,000 cap. So if we were to change the cap, your client would be affected. So that may be why you were invited to this. I spent a lot of time on the PDC looking those businesses up. So please, we want to hear input, but keep in mind that as of right now, the concept is to propose the work group, not what the final version of a fee structure would be. That we really want to make sure we are not presupposing what that work group of interested parties would come up with. And I also want to make sure I emphasize that we envision that work group to include a variety of interests. It's not going to be just business folks at that table, right? We want to make sure that our community groups and our environmental advocates and business and other state agencies are also at the table. Potentially local jurisdictions, they may pay the fees too. Maybe they should be at the table. So coming up with all of that is also important. So if you have recommendations of, hey, you should absolutely make sure that this type of entity is at that table, make sure you share that with us so we can, add it to the list of potential work group attendees. All right, so I think that's it for us. Again, please reach out, and I really appreciate your participation today. And I look forward to chatting with some or all of you at some point in the future, and I really appreciate it. Thanks, and have a great afternoon. Missy, I think